So, mitosis, right? Jinx!
The World Wide Web is like a picky child who refuses to eat anything unless you've got the words viral, video, and gaming on every microbe you feed it, and only then does it become a big strong boy capable of, I don't know, making indie dev millionaires or something. It's pretty low-key. YouTube and other online video sharing sites along a similar business model couldn't get enough of the 2010s because, oh baby, what's that? Ding dong, the universe has invented the Let's Play, an easy way to garner an audience and make bank by recording yourself making sounds akin to giving birth over Happy Wheels, except it didn't even matter what you played as long as you gave one hell of a goddamn performance. And if you were distinct, funny enough, and pumping these out like modern indie RPGs with themes of depression, fam, somebody gave a shit and put you on the road to building a genuine career, and the lucky sod you just promoted the video game of to like 10 million people. Well done. There's a reason Let's Plays are still flourishing 10 years later. It's seriously a format that just works, benefiting everybody involved. Except we could benefit everybody even more. Creepy viral gaming. Now, what attracts an extreme reaction more than a spooky interactive experience? Well, not much. People like watching other people screaming. I know for a fact at least 2 people watch my weird video broadcasts. Don't think you're any better. And so, as the prophecy foretold, scary indie games would become a huge card in the Let's Players deck. Creepy viral indie gaming morphing almost into a genre of its own. I know a lot of people would give the crown to 2010's Amnesia here, but Slender's really where things took off, methinks. Getting nuts popular back in its heyday of 2012 and 2013, purely down to epic scary YouTuber reactions. Yeah, it was great. Slender, Limbo, The Bane of My Existence, and that one in particular, actually, Jesus Christ. The masses were into this shit, so hey, let's combine the freshest, most popular trends of the 2010s with the most popular trends of the late 90s to make something absolutely fucking nuclear with mixed results. Tattletail, developed and released by Waygetter Electronics on December 28th, 2016, explores everybody's favorite conspiracy. What if Furbies really wanted your bone marrow? From a glance, it was yet another splash in the ocean of child-friendly property-turned-demonic indie titles following the mega success of Five Nights at Freddy's, the 2014 survival horror that basically spawns the gaming subgenre of mascot horror. FNAF, it's Chuck E. Cheese robots on crack. These are pizza chain mascots. This is terrifying. What else would you call this? No, what are you, nuts? And what a sodding formula that clearly works, spitting out games easy to market to the primary YouTube demographic, with an appealing child-friendly front and the promise of something spooky on the underbelly to really hook them in, cause ooh, this is big kids shit. Your mum won't let you watch The Goonies cause it's rated 12 and it's too much of a scarefest. Yeah, go on, have some implied child murder instead, you're welcome. But with all of the generally questionable quality of the viral mascot horror hits that followed, it's easy to look at Killer Furbies and assume it can't be anything more than much of the same, though I'd actually beg to differ on that front. Unlike something like Benzie and the Ink Machine, as a random example of mascot horror, the tension that game tries to generate banks on the hope that turning a 1920s looking cartoon character into a scary blood monster is enough to frighten you on its own, with no real reason outside of that. Tattletail's gimmick, on the other hand, has a bit of that initial uncanny valley element to factor into the game and to capitalize on, for one specific reason. Personally, I've rarely found the mere concept of performing animatronics to be all that scary, but just like with people growing up with Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza, to find a game like Five Nights at Freddy's tap into that childhood phobia of the robots having a mind of their own, Tattletail banks on the very real mass paranoia spread back in the 90s that fixated on the idea of these mass-manufactured talking Furby toys to be fit with some wicked ulterior motive, with stories of the things activating during the night, saying things they're not supposed to, possibly haunted by Satan or capitalistic greed or Yan'an, who knows? Where something like Bendy considers nothing more than just the concept of a sentient wash of ink trying to get you, be it the initial driving force of its horror. Tattletail seems to have something going for it, like I can see where the horror would come from. And that's what makes the Fate of Tattletail that much more interesting to me, in that it sure as hell punched a hole in the indie horror gaming scene like a hot geyser of sewage water pummels through the Earth's crust, cause how would a game with this synopsis released in the mascot horror boom of the mid-2010s not? But despite the very mid-2010s nostalgia-baited hook and the overnight spike in attention, as it stands these days, Tattletail's practically ceased to exist in almost any official capacity, relegated to nothing nothing more than an Easter egg in one of the developer's later games in neon white, and does nothing more than the talking point at the center of YouTube video essay retrospectives. Son of a bitch. So you know what? I want to see what the bitch even caused all this, why Tattletail's popularity sunk in the first place, and ponder whether or not the game still holds up today. Cause despite otherwise featuring some seemingly substantial and unique mechanics, ideas, and designs, this thing was released at the perfect time to get caught up in the mascot horror hype, especially with kids who grew up with Furbies, likely at an age in 2016 where they'd want to reminisce by playing a video game that tells them that they should have been fucking terrified the entire time and have that be their only takeaway. What kind of a stogie-hooked maniac would develop something like this? Alright, well, punching in Way Getter Electronics on AOL, first results what I assume is the most 90s looking site I've ever seen in my life. I guess Way Getter shares a namesake with the in-universe toy manufacturer. Home products credits, let's see, Ben Esposito shows up twice, he's gotta be important. Hey, he's got a Twitter, let's check out everything he's worked on. Sonic Dreams? Well, things can only go uphill from here. If I can survive 5 seconds of B-roll, I can survive anything. Let's boot the sucker up and see just how well Tattletail holds up as a spin on indie mascot horror. Does this even count as mascot? Whatever. So, past the fuzzy-ass loading screen, we're thrust into one of the most polarizing menus I have ever stumbled across. Tattletail! Oh, I have seconds to live! I can only assume from the game's release trailer, behind that gleaming 90s nostalgia, right here we have the game's antagonist most likely, Mama Tattletail. A cross between a Teddy Ruxpin and a really cool cassette player. I'd take this guy out to lunch if I was straight. Yeah, and there's a dead body in the shot, and ooh, Mama Tattletail was discontinued. Can't imagine there's any negative correlation there. But from what I gather, she's the central focus here on the title screen, shrouded in darkness. It's the little things, but Tattletail's core aesthetic seems firmly planted from the get-go. The bright, stylized logo, the grainy VCR UI, even the 7-segment typeface up here indicates the idea of a digital alarm clock or something, cooking up this image of being a kid in the 90s, I'd imagine. Mass-marketed toys, home videotapes, and the glow of a clock on your bedstand, which is exactly where we kick off, in the bedroom of some random kid, waking up in the early morning of December 20th, 1998. To go play with our freak of nature Christmas present 5 nights before the big day. You're tasked with the simple goal of finding an opening in your present, free to roam and explore your limited surroundings, majorly and exclusively consisting of your house. This is where the bulk of the game takes place, save for the off chance you're allowed to poke around the porch in the backyard, and yeah, it's not much to have to get accustomed to. You've got various rooms upstairs, and a basement slathered in concrete to cozy up in, with a couple offshoots, both shrouded in all kinds of fun dark shadows for literally anything to pop out of. The ambience is spot on here. From the perspective of a little kid running around a comparatively big-ass house you could easily get cornered in, with some pulsing, brooding synths to accompany, empty enough to be easily spotted by something undesirable, yet cluttered enough to make it tough to figure out where that something might be. It's a compact, yet relatively spacious playing field to be running around in. I dig it. You've got work to do, however, discovering Tattletail, or rather officially baby talking Tattletail, tucked away downstairs. A little purple bundle of one of God's creations, I'm sure. Sucks to be you though, because once you rip the little bastard from his cardboard prison, he starts screaming, because he's just a hungry little baby, and you're now his responsible legal guardian, so start acting like it. The first night is essentially just a tutorial, featuring you to feed Tattletail the contents of the fridge when he's hungry, to brush him when he needs grooming, and plopping him down at his charging station when he starts getting loopy. You've got 3 rapidly depleting bars up in the top left to indicate what Tattletail's currently in need of, so you'll never have to worry about forgetting to take care of him, unless you're a terrible parent. Once you're done though, it's back to bed, with the phone now ringing and the front door wide open. The game advises you not to answer, but I'm really feeling the urge right now to exercise my free will. Oh, no way! It's... I'm kidding, it's a tense little moment. Phones can't do shit to me, but I have a weird, unbridled anxiety over the idea of open doors in the dead of night. Sue me. The 4 nights remaining follow a similar structure of slowly introducing more and more of the game's mechanics to you, quite effectively, both in terms of how organically they're integrated and how surprisingly creepy this game gets with such a novel concept in tow. More on that in a tad. Like the very next night, for example, where your mission is to investigate the clunking noise. You'll find yourself down in the basement yet again, only for Tattletail to be missing from where you left him, as he's having a silly old time bathing his electronic internals in detergent. Pulling him out will prompt you to play with a little bush weasel, destroying a vase in the process, because children are terrible. Doing so causes the power to cut out, the ambient audio to intensify, and the once strictly utilitarian task prompt to simply read, "Oh no." Thankfully, your one saving grace is hanging out on the bottom of a nearby wreck. A flashlight? With as many quotation marks as I could fit around that word in audible speech as possible. It's an inventive little spin on your typical luminous little handheld, essentially working on a timer, in the sense that it's glow in the dark and requires a good old shake to light back up. 5 shakes brings the brights up to max capacity and longest lasting duration, requiring you to re-shake once the bulb's intensity's fully decayed. It's a real loud piece of shit, but this was the 90s, everything on the planet was loud. Poking around the dark and swinging back into the main basement, however, causes that short-lived relief to fade, with something peeking back at you from the shadows, snuffing out your glorified glow stick. And then it's gone. Yippee! Time to process that terrifying experience across a cozy 24 hours next night. Here we go! December 22nd, we're awoken by another strange grinding noise coming from the basement, and upon further inspection, following a trail of colorful eggs, we actually run into Mama Tattletail herself, commencing genuinely one of the most unsettling moments in the game in my opinion. Upon inserting a tape into her cassette slot, she'll begin playing audio intended to accompany a kid's storybook, audibly reading out each page. And I don't know what it's down to, whether it's the contrast between the tone of her voice and the clear ulterior meaning behind what she's saying, the quality of the recording, or the accompanying music softly fluctuating in pitch the whole time. It's a moment that always had me a little on edge, like something was about to run into the room or something once it was over. Thankfully, the exact opposite happens, and she sods off. Until you're back upstairs and you're met with the same red eyes as before, fizzling out your flashlight yet again. It's here, for the first time in the game, that it's possible to die to Mama Tattletail if you're not careful, as she's not straight up vanishing again. If you get too close, it's a fistful of motors. But hey, as you complete the stage and the next night begins, you're equipped with all the tools you'll ever need, so half goddamn way through the game, it starts to up the ante and fully integrate all the established mechanics. The next night has you playing hide and seek with Tattletail's color complementary friend, except during the hiding portion of the game, Mama Tattletail's out for blood. Each of the 3 times you do this will last 30, 60, and 90 seconds respectively, so it becomes more and more of an endurance test to see just how well you can fare against her. But in order to do that, you can't make any kind of sound. And that's where Tattletail's mechanics have been leading up to. That yellow speaker up in the corner, yeah, that appears whenever you make enough noise to potentially alert the enemy of your whereabouts and allow her to kill you. Running, charging your light, Tattletail speaking, that will trigger sound, and that is what will attract unwanted attention. All of Tattletail's demands that you've got to meet can mean the difference between life and death if you don't keep them topped up. But actually, that's what makes these encounters such a fantastic balancing act. With all the mediators to keep Tattletail at bay spread across the lounge, kitchen, and basements, you are constantly on your toes during them without the need for anything to actually chase you. It is a legitimately fun risk and reward system, methinks. If you're caught up at a bad time with Tattletail hungry while you're both in the basement, do you wait it out and pray he'll make the timer, or run up the stairs to keep him fed, causing a stir and risking an early demise? Yeah, you get it? Tattletail, he tattles on you and he's got a tail, you know, a fun play on the phrase Tattletail in itself, a bit of an informal way to refer to a stupid fucking narc who won't stop screaming when you're perfectly situated in the worst possible location relative to each mechanic that you gotta dash between in order to soothe the stupid fucking thing. It's cute. That's the kind of neat and surprisingly well-polished system I like to see in a simple indie horror. Anyway, it's time for some weird shit that's got nothing to do with any of that. Beating the Night grants you a VHS tape, pop it in your trusty VCR, and oh baby, we're parked in the director's seat for just the strangest commercial. You take control of each camera shot portrayed in the game's baby talking Tattletail TV ad, though it's set up like you're flipping through them like it's a live broadcast. For some reason, it's hardly significant, aside from the fact that the feed keeps cutting out and there's a litter of dead bodies in the background, and I don't know, it's cool to have this in the game, I guess, and gives the player a bit more context as to why exactly Mama's so dangerous if they never did watch the game's trailer. But I did. Anyway, it's Christmas Eve. You wake up, Tattletail asks you to find his friends, something is breeding these things like rabbits, Jesus Christ, and they want to throw a party for Mama Tattletail. Oh, that solves that mystery. Finding each and every one in the area grants you a grocery list of more shit to find around the house. Cupcakes, festive lights, candles, and it's a satanic ritual to get rid of Mama Tattletail. Well, sign me up. I love banishing capitalist produce to the underworld. Light the candles, rewind the VHS tape, and she's stolen the candles. What a dick! Also pretty impressive for a hunk of plastic without opposable thumbs. Yeah, it's game time now, boys. We're in the penultimate act of the show, the climax of Tattletail, and it can suck a poopy out my ass. It's a neat idea for a final battle. Everything's all hellish and terrible, and Mama really wants to bite my vocal cords out. It's the gameplay that kinda sucks here, in the sense that every candle's hidden inside my favorite, more sodding vases. It's just smashing a load of these things dotted around the floor to have a chance at finding a lost candle, each vase, of course, making a splash in what I like to call the audible spectrum. It's a bit of an annoying sequence. I honestly would have much preferred something else that involved the balancing act of running to and fro like before. That was a neat combination of ideas. Here, there's not much of a strategy with this, just dumb luck. Thankfully though, it's not too much of a nightmare to push through, with finding and relighting the candles causing the VHS tape to float in mid-air, allowing you to destroy it, and by proxy, everybody's behated Furby eldritch horror. Anyway, it's Christmas Day, you go to open your gift, except Tattletail's gone, and you're treated to a jump scare. The ritual failed, you stupid idiot. Roll credits. So that was the bad ending. It's a bit of a shit ending if I'm honest. I sold my soul for nothing! On the other hand, there is a way to atone for your sins through the addictive act of hoarding. Collectible eggs hidden through each and every night of the game. These are fun to collect on a casual playthrough, but as soon as you finish, you're missing 4 and it turns into every 3D platformer from the early 2000s ever, because there ain't no indication of where the missing ones actually are. Fun. Yeah, there's an egg up on the kitchen counter, but only if you're playing this specific stage of the game. Doesn't matter if it's the same physical location, because that shit's only showing up when the game wants it to. One level in particular leaves collectible eggs behind when Tattletail's friend hops from hiding location to hiding location. But if you didn't catch on to that very specific and situational mechanic that is unique in the fact that almost every other egg is totally available to you from the get-go if you poke around the right place, that's a good few eggs you're totally gonna miss just because you didn't check at the right time, let alone the right stage. I ended up missing a couple of those and a couple eggs from the Christmas Eve stage. I don't know, my stupid ass just couldn't find those last two, but I think regardless, it would have been nice to have some kind of a counter next to each level in the stage select or something. That way, you have a much better general idea of where to look, so you're not replaying the entire game over again, just for the 1 or 2 you might have skipped over on your first run. That's how you get the good ending though. You don't get jump scared. Tattletail gives you his tag and a golden flashlight for 100%ing the game, which would have been really cool. If not for the fact that you get it after likely your second playthrough of this very short game, collecting all the eggs you missed last time because it replaces the standard flashlight with a permanent one that makes things a million times easier. Would have been fun to have that available for the second playthrough to find some of those other eggs, at least if you're not gonna indicate which stages have eggs missing, but sure, we can not do that. Not doing that works too. I love the internet. But hey, with all the eggs collected and the levels complete, that's the base campaign completed. Mama Tattletail's been banished, the intelligent race of Tattletails are safe once again, and now we get to deal with the traumatic aftermath, the Kaleidoscope Expansion. I actually played this when it released, it being DLC for a game I had a particular fondness for. It had some funky looking visuals, I replayed it for this review and I can confirm that that is literally all it is. It's not great. If you want to walk through some yoinked up geometry that offers 0 new game mechanics, this is it, baby! Also, Tattletail needs to pop a Vivance or something, good grief. It is so boring and really confusing. Story-wise, I'm still struggling to understand what or why or what the shit is even going on here. The game went from the novel concept of relatively grounded paranormal toys capitalizing on actual Western paranoia back in the Furby's heyday, to totally abstract, artistic, weird shit that I really think is not Tattletail's strong suit. It's got something to do with traveling backwards through your memories of the events leading up to Christmas, but everything's quote-unquote normal now. You find the occasional letter from whom I assume to be your therapist, future self, or some other time vortex manipulating entity, but they're talking about this big old kaleidoscope entity like it's a cosmic horror mirror realm that if you enter there's a chance of screwing up time or something. It feels like it's trying to offer some kind of super contrived canonical explanation for the paranormal events of Tattletail, or that somehow they caused some kind of a fracture in space-time when there was just nothing leading up to that. I am being entirely serious when I say that an expansion dragging you and Tattletail through the literal depths of hell would make more sense as a canonical continuation of the original story than this, with all the weird satanic black magic seemingly going on with the toys in the first place. Definitely not what I would have wanted to see from a Tattletail expansion. It offered me nothing and I left with nothing. I would have loved to have seen an extra spanner in the works to spice things up, game mechanic wise, maybe in a new location, just something to add to the experience rather than to remix what I have already played with none of the build-up or the tension or the inventiveness of that. Like the base game, this also has two endings, a good ending and a boring ending. Both are equally as easy to grab. I pick the good ending because why the shit would I choose not to have fun? I mean, I did willingly play this DLC. But even if the Kaleidoscope soured the overall package for me, it was a free update and it's not offensively terrible. Just disappointing in comparison to how truly solid the main game is. Oh, and also there's a built-in ending for finding an exploit in the map and jumping off the edge. Creative solution, this is real, and that's everything Tattletail's got to offer from head to toe. That's what it's all about, and I'm glad I stuck out to the end with this one, because truthfully, it's got a lot going for it. It's so easy to look at Tattletail at surface level and assume it's just begging to be more of that Five Nights at Freddy's inspired Let's Player beat. But upon replaying so many years later, I feel like that kind of attitude does the game such a disservice, where I'm happy to report that it's actually handled in a way that feels very humble in a sense. Esposito clearly had an idea here, executed it nicely, and explored an interesting way to move the gameplay along in such a limited ballground. Tattletail doesn't offer a ton in the grand scheme of things. I ended up 100%ing everything in just about a couple hours. It's really not a very long game, and that's honestly my biggest critique here, that there just isn't more of it, not you. With all that said though, The Last of Tattletail released in 2017, over half a decade ago. I'd really love to take a dive into what Tattletail ended up evolving into over that time and seeing how, if at all, such a niche idea still stands the test of time. Oh, it fucking died. It would have been so easy to take such a well-rounded concept and those unique gameplay mechanics to spew out a billion sequels with little to no regard for the integrity of the IP, but there's that, and there's doing literally nothing else with the idea. It's definitely a bit strange, and while by all means I respect the fact that the team behind this thing were probably satisfied with the one-and-done deal, but with Tattletail being so commonly looked at as yet but another creepy viral indie gaming hit, it's so peculiar to me that's unlike properties like Five Nights at Freddy's, Bendy and the Ink Machine, and more recent games like Poppy Playtime that had a clear upward spiral in popularity, Tattletail initially only saw a steady decline beginning after the hype of its DLC had wavered. Don't get me wrong, people loved this thing upon its initial release and celebrated Tattletail for all its strengths, but as someone largely aware of a lot of the biggest creepy viral indie gaming trends over and up until the end of the last decade, Tattletail sticks out to me as one of the only IPs to have seen little to no momentum in its longevity, for the most part. The most prominent sticks in the mud here I've already mentioned: FNAF, Bendy, Poppy Playtime. These guys have got merch and sequels and storefronts and merch taking on a life of their own as an invasive subspecies of morning glories by the dozen. These guys have merch, by the way. How far's your nearest GameStop, bro? Practically every big indie game splash that's persisted through to the 2020s made their presence known on release and have only gotten louder as the years have passed, for better or for worse, with every new update, game release, and merch drop only fueling the self-perpetuating audiences of these franchises. The rate at which these games do this, not necessarily an indicator of selling out or clasping onto a lack of integrity. Not necessarily. Tattletail never even went as far as to dip into print-to-order shirt designs, the only inklings of evidence for any legitimate Tattletail merchandise ever coming to fruition, existing in the form of a lone cluster of pixels of a prototype Tattletail plush spotted by a Reddit user in an otherwise nonchalant Twitter photo, that 3 years later was apparently auctioned off to and reviewed by some dude on YouTube that's, from what I can gather, is the real deal, with no photos or videos otherwise of the specific design festering anywhere else on the web. That's combined with the fact that said plush sports a way stronger build quality than literally any other Tattletail plush I've ever goddamn seen. Either this is one of the most insanely specific hoaxes I've ever discovered in my life, or 100% of Tattletail's merchandising line belongs to one guy. That ain't the end of Tattletail's licensing ventures though, as there is a totally legitimate possibility of an official cartoon, apparently. Co-developer Geneva Hodgson having written a potential show pitch for the IP. Also, with this tweet being anything to go by, apparently Tattletail's just haunted, sure. But with all that said, and despite how wickedly solid the base game is, I really do think the fall of Tattletail was just a result of these devs wanting nothing more than to keep Tattletail as intended. Just a one-off experience. The potential shows an exception to this, but as far as official Tattletail content goes, we hardly got much in the way of anything else aside from the lackluster expansion, but again, it's very likely that Tattletail was intended to just be a one-and-done project, so it's no wonder the DLC stunk nuts. We were given what was made, we wanted more, and we sure as hell got it. The game straight up avoided merch with nothing but a fizzled fat mojo deal to show for it, and ironically, I wouldn't be surprised if Tattletail's late 2016 release actually helped it survive less in the long run. With the overabundance of FNAF-like indie games, I could easily see people who'd otherwise give Tattletail a shot have that shot be snuffed out by their intrigue and one of the tons of other games dropped at the time. I feel like the eventual decline in Tattletail popularity was a partially calculated one, the devs content with what they'd accomplished and not super feeling the need to cling on to its coattails for years to come. Tattletail really does feel like more of a passion project born out of somebody who just happens to delve into a lot of creative ventures, with Ben Esposito's track record for music and game development sticking strong, so it honestly doesn't surprise me that the game stayed in its comfort zone and ended up leaving a legacy behind of nothing but, oh yeah, that was pretty goddamn solid. I mean, hell, the budget wasn't huge, the game takes place in a single focused location, the entirety of the upstairs of which is a modified stock asset, but that's chill as hamburgers, that's what stock assets are for, you big dummy! Either way, from the game's overall production quality, to the finely tuned level design and game mechanics, down to the nostalgic exploitation of fads passed by, Tattletail ain't the most crazy unique idea out there on paper, but what it does boast is so obviously crafted with a sense of care, which is a whole lot more than what a lot of the current flicks in the viral indie gaming space can say. It's definitely its own flavor of the en masse stampede of cute thing gone creepy, to say the least. And hey, if that's my biggest takeaway from your game, is that necessarily a bad thing? Like, holy sodding shit, do I have some things to say about the state of game series like Five Nights at Freddy's these days, but all things considered, Tattletail is a game I've never not looked back on fondly. For the most part. It doesn't step way too far out of what it's capable of, yet it still excels at delivering a funky twist on retro mascot horror with some legitimately appealing designs and featuring the only good hiding mechanics in any video game ever at that. And again, it is so easy to harp on games like this for appearing Five Nights at Freddy's-like, just like Tattletail was lauded for back on release. But scratching beneath the surface to figure out what the stupid little thing really is makes a hell of a lot of a difference. I feel like we're all forgetting what the real takeaway from all this shit is though, not just Tattletail, but the quality every mascot horror game released over the past decade sported. That mascot horror at its core focuses on the dismissive, manipulative, and exploitative practices of predatory capitalist entertainment manufacturers, the in-universe Tattletail's no different, and that we should dismantle the billionaires that lead them, along with half the devs of these things that have ironically turned into the tropes they were satirizing the entire time. Aww. He's either a progressive or he's just fucking hungry again, I still can't tell.